do with that when it comes to engaging our students and our campus communities around recognizing and responding to stalking. So if you're thinking, well, actually, I don't really know that, or I'd like a refresher, or what have you, definitely recommend checking out our website. Our foundational webinar, which has a lot of content, is called Context is Key. That's available in our archive of recorded webinars. We also have lots of other resources on and tools on recognizing and responding to stalking. So I hope that you'll consider what we're talking about today sort of in concert with those other possibilities. And so, we always want to remember that there are four major crimes under the Violence Against Women Act. It's domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. But it's always kind of like and stalking. Like we almost call the website andstalking.org. And often when it comes to awareness education, there's the sense of like, oh yeah, well, we kind of cover that. Like it's kind of in our dating abuse stuff, or it's, we added on to things. And I understand that it can be really hard to have the time and the spaciousness and the buy-in to dedicate the time on stalking, right? Like I used to do awareness programming on campuses, and I was told I need to talk about dating violence, sexual assault, bystander prevention, gender norms, have a video, have group breakouts, make it fun. And I had 90 minutes. So if someone had come to me and said, but are you talking about stalking? I would have been like, do not make me add a single thing to this training. And so these resources are really developed with that in mind that I'm about to show you today, ranging from I have no time to do this to actually let's do a standalone program. So hopefully there'll be something in here that you can use on your campus to help get your folks talking stalking. All right, so SPARC is funded by the Office on Violence Against Women. We are the technical assistance provider on stalking, and our website, which I'll refer to throughout the day, is stalkingawareness.org. Like I should have said at the top, my name's Dana Flightman. I'm the training and awareness specialist at SPARC, and there you can find on our website practitioner guides. Those are broken out by discipline, and we have a section specifically for campus responders as well as for awareness educators. Training modules, which we'll talk about today, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Victim resources like fact sheets, infographics, hotlines, and webinars, including some focused more on awareness. We're also on social media. Our handle on there is at Follow Us Legally. If you get our sixth sense of humor at SPARC, we want you to follow us, and I hope you'll do so because simply sharing our resources, which are focused on stalking, of course, is a very easy way to build some awareness and um, integrate into your response. And I hope you'll sign up for our newsletter. I always joke, as an anti stalking organization, we will not contact you excessively or without your consent. So you have to actually opt into our newsletter, and it's one we send around quarterly. It's not one of those you're getting all the time. So I hope that you will connect with us. So, why awareness? So, stalking's bad. We have to do something about it. Why do awareness activities matter? I think it can be easy to kind of minimize the impact of awareness at this point because we tend to be very focused on intervention and response. And it's not that one's more important than the other, but it's a yes and, right? Because the reality is that while we're so focused on enhancing our response to stalking, we need to realize that most victims don't enter our response to stalking, right? Most do not report. Most do not seek services. And so that's a huge part of this. We could have the best response in the world, which we all have more work to get there, right? But if victims aren't recognizing what's going on as stalking, if they're telling their friends and family and they minimize it or dismiss it and don't name it or know where they can go, what good is it, right? And so that awareness piece is really important. So myths about stalking have some impacts. Now, this is not the be all end all of everything related to, sorry, my microphone went on mute there. But the myths about stalking do have some negative impacts. They impact victim help seeking, right? So, who is seeking help? Is this worthy of help seeking? Where do I go? It impacts our informal support, those friends and family that they tell. Does that person say that sounds really scary? Let's get you to some support, or do they minimize it or dismiss it? It impacts our victim service provision and our criminal justice response because most folks have not had formal training on stalking, or at least not very much. And so we as professional responders are also influenced by these myths. So, public awareness doesn't solve every problem, but it does help with these different aspects that are important. It helps victims to identify stalking behaviors, to dispel some of those myths, to recognize the dangerousness of stalking, to seek help and resources, and hopefully to affect cultural change and public discourse around stalking victimization. So, if we look at this study on why don't victims report to police, and we know most don't, there's a variety of reasons, right? And of course, victims have a variety of reasons that can be quite personal. And not all of these are mitigated by more awareness on stalking, but these ones could be, right? And that amounts to quite a bit. So the feeling that this is a private or personal matter, this is just like folks thought about domestic violence for such a long time, that matter of this is private violence, this isn't something that I should bring to anyone. That minimization, that it's minor or that it's not important, and that lack of clarity that a crime occurred, not recognizing that what's happening is stalking, or further that stalking is a crime and or a student conduct violation if we're talking about the campus adjudication process, or that sense of shame and embarrassment, right? We still see quite a bit of victim blaming around stalking, and so those same kind of questions that I think we're a little bit more ready to call out when we hear it asked to a victim of sexual violence get asked to our victims of stalking quite a bit, right? That, well, were you clear you wanted them to stop? And aren't you flattered by the attention? And that kind of thing also plagues our stalking victims. And so when we have a better understanding of stalking, it really can impact a lot of these reasons for this lack of reporting in the first place. And it's also about that identifying stalking, because if you look at these two figures, who looks like a stalker? I'm going to go with Mr. Trenchcoat, right? Because that really matches our popular image of what stalking looks like. And we often see stalking presented in our media as an obsessed fan stalking a celebrity, or like a faceless stranger, or a secret admirer. We don't know who it is. And all those things can and do happen, but as you already know, that's not generally what's going on, right? Usually our victims know offenders, our offenders know our victims. So the challenge is you have victims stalker. That's just my ex having a hard time getting over things. Well, again, surprising no one here, that's a major category of stalking offender. And victims are afraid when they know the offender, but they're less likely to report. So it's the studies that found exactly that. Victims who knew their offenders were more likely to report feeling fearful, but they're less likely to report to police than those stalked by a stranger, because that stalking victimization they're experiencing doesn't match this trope or this kind of narrative of what stalking looks like or what real stalking is. And this has real impacts. So, this other study found that our non specialist officers and laypersons share the misperception that our stranger stalkers are more dangerous to the safety of our victims than acquaintance or ex partners. And y'all know that's not true either. That actually, while all stalkers can be dangerous, absolutely, on average, our intimate partner stalkers are the most dangerous. And generally, the closer someone is or was to a victim, the more likely they are to threaten and or harm that victim. And so, anecdotally, I had a victim who was stalked twice in her life, totally unrelated incidents, was just really unlucky two times. One time, the offender was her ex husband. One time, the offender was a homeless man with mental health issues who lived in her neighborhood. So, which one do you, man? Because that better fit the narrative of that's what a stalker looks like. But when this victim was afraid for her life, it was the ex-husband stalking her. And so we need to check our assumptions and think through that and realize that this misinformation has some real impacts as well. Like I already said, we know that most of our victims tell a friend, family member, or someone they know and trust first. So how that person responds makes a huge difference in if they will continue to seek help and take it seriously, or if they'll shut down and have that really chilling effect. And so, one thing that I encounter quite a bit, which my guess is you've encountered as well, is the casual use of the word stalking. And I think this can be a good starting point to engage folks on this topic. So, you might have heard or said or texted something like, oh my God, I'm totally stalking you on Instagram or whatever. And yes, you can use social media to stalk, but with the context here, that's probably not what's happening, right? And I hear this all the time, like, oh my God, not to stalk you, but, or I was totally stalking you. And I'm certainly not saying that the casual use of the word stalking causes stalking. It doesn't, but it does dilute the seriousness of the term because you have people calling things stalking when they aren't, and then not calling it stalking what it is. Um, and the challenge is that it is a bit unique to this term at this point, I would argue, the word stalking, right? Like no one's like, oh man, that party was so lit. It's arson, right? That's not a thing. If you tell your friend there was arson at my apartment, they're going to be like, dude, there was arson? You got to call the police. There's freaking arson. But if you tell your friend, I think it was stalking, you're likely to get this response of like, okay, was it stalking or was it stalking? And again, that can have a really chilling effect. And if our victims continue to seek help and services. And so, what words can we use instead? Here's a list of some. So, I hear this used in different contexts. So, there's not a one size fits all. But if it's about that contact, right? So, people say, oh, not to stalk you, but did you read my email? Or did you get that message? Or I'm not stalking you, but I'm just back, Instead of saying that, maybe sorry to bother you, sorry to nag you, sorry I'm calling again, or here I am bugging you again about this, right? Or it's about meeting in person, I promise I'm not following you, looking for you, it's about that obsession. Like, ugh, I love these. I'm doing too much, right? Like, ugh, I love these pictures. I'm sorry. I like cannot stop talking about it. Maybe that's what we want to say instead of I'm stalking your photos or I'm stalking you or ooh, I looked you up last night and stalked you before our date. No, it's, I was thinking about you and I did a little bit of research, right? I did some creeping on the internet. This isn't to say that we should use euphemisms instead of saying stalking when it is stalking. We should call it stalking when it is. But my point here is we should not call it stalking when it is not. And so here are a few different alternatives to that that don't misuse that term. So there's different options for public awareness. Like I said right at the top, I understand not everyone has the capacity or time or audience to do a standalone program. And so there are ways to incorporate stalking into your existing materials that shouldn't take too much time or effort. My informal campaign is called Sister, Can You Spare a Slide? And it's, hey, can we spare a slide for stalking? So if you have time for just one slide, my recommendation is it would say something like this. Obviously, there's much more to explore in this topic, but just to name it, to say, hey, stalking, it's a crime. It's a pattern of behaviors that causes fear. Here's some examples of it. Usually it's someone you know, and it can happen during or after a relationship. It can be dangerous. Here's where to go if you or a friend might be experiencing that. Of course, I'd love for us to say more, but this is already way more than comes out in most presentations on, Title IX or sexual assault or what have you. And just naming it and saying, hey, this is part of this too, right? And it's called stalking and it's serious and there's help available can go a really long way. You can also integrate it when you're talking primarily about another topic. So, say it's a dating violence or a healthy relationship presentation. Um, a lot of those have slides that describe different abusive behaviors. So maybe on your emotional abuse slide, your digital abuse slide, you don't even have to add a slide. You can just say, hey, if these things are happening in brackets here, like somebody's spreading rumors, they're contacting you excessively, they're following you, they're keeping tabs on you, they're watching you, and you feel that, you're being watched and you can't get away from them and that your privacy is being violated, that is emotional abuse, it's digital abuse, and it might also be stalking. And by the way, stalking is its own conduct violation and a crime, and it can escalate. So make sure that you seek help for that. Even that can go a really long way, right? So let's integrate it even without a lot of time. If we're doing a case study, almost every case study or example is going to include stalking because stalking is so often part of intimate partner violence. And often they're not always sexual violence. And so if you're, talking about a survivor's story or you're watching a video and talking about it, you're assigning people an article to read, just note the stalking behaviors. So back when I was doing this, I'm dating myself a little bit, but the case study that was often used was Yardley Love. And so um, they're stalking in that case study, right? So to say, of course, we're focusing on the violence, we're focusing on the homicide, but to say this offender also stalked the victim. He had gone through her computer. He had followed her here. He showed up here. He was asking friends and family where she was. It's important to realize that's a crime and victimization in its own right. And that can be a predictor as well. So we want to call out those behaviors, right? So just to add that to the conversation. Same with our bystander intervention piece. If we're doing any kind of bystander training, we want to be talking stalking as well. And so include some examples. Now, one challenge here is that bystander intervention, and I'm generalizing, but tends to be pretty incident based. Like the example I often hear is that, you're at the party and you see this predator trying to ply a victim with alcohol and drag her away, and how can you distract them and stop that from happening. And that's great, that's a great thing to do, and it may or may not be relevant to stalking, which is by definition a pattern of behavior. So if you stop one incident, that's still great, you may have not stopped them all. And so it may not be as clear as that, not that it's always clear, but that example doesn't really necessarily resonate with a stalking course of conduct. And so I think of it big picture more around that cultural and norms change. What's normal in a relationship, what is not, and some examples there, so that stop asking your roommate where she is, she'll text you if she wants to. Oh, you're looking through their phone, that's weird, don't you trust them? Ugh, I would hate if someone did that to me, right? Are you waiting here for that person? That's really creepy. I don't think you should do that, right? So that kind of intervention can also be really powerful. But let's use some stalking examples as well and think about that bigger picture, setting boundaries, respecting boundaries, kind of norms change. Same with our consent and healthy relationship education. And so when we're talking about boundaries and about consent, it's not only physical, right? You're allowed to set boundaries around your time, around your privacy, around your communication and its frequency. And so, while the norms around privacy, particularly in the digital realm, may change, what doesn't change is that people have boundaries and that they should trust their instincts when those are violated and feel free to speak out about that, right? And so asking our students, say, hey, being in a relationship doesn't entitle your partner to 100% access to every moment of your life. How do you set and communicate boundaries around your privacy, time, and contact, right? And talk about that consent piece, is that it's not only, again, it's not only physical, it's about that as someone violating your boundaries. Um, and I think that this can get tricky because, and I'm generalizing, but generationally, we see different boundaries around, especially digital space, right? You might have younger folks saying, well, of course I'd share my passwords, I have nothing to hide. And older folks saying, that's a violation of privacy, you absolutely should not do that. And so I don't think it's helpful to approach this as here's what you should or should not do. I think what's helpful is saying people set boundaries in different ways. You're allowed to set your own. There's pros and cons to every choice you make, right? And so, what are you comfortable with? And how do you communicate that? And then what happens when you don't feel comfortable? Do you feel safe speaking up and saying, I don't really want to share my password, not because I'm hiding anything, but I don't know, it just feels like some things should just be for me. Do you feel safe saying that and like your partner will respect you? Or are you afraid to say that because they might become abusive towards you or yell at you or really press on you and pressure you or escalate their behavior or punish you in some way? So it's about that conversation, and can we have it, yes or no? Um, Rather than a list of here's what you should and shouldn't do. Because sometimes I see, again, especially with the tech piece, it being communicated that way. And just instead saying, be mindful of your settings, be mindful of what you're sharing, and make sure you're in control of it, right? Because you have that right. You get to control your time, your independence, your finances, your privacy. We also have a resource on our website for doing public awareness campaigns. So we have a bunch of, slides and social media, but it's also great to engage your students and or staff and faculty in creating your own that really reflects your campus. And so we have some guidance here for ways to talk about stalking. So this could reinforce an in-person or online, more formal program. And or just up that dosage, right? So get this kind of be around the campus. And so it can be a really great first step, as and or one that reinforces other action. So definitely suggest checking that out. So let's say you have a little more time. You want, okay, you can do a little bit more on stalking. What should you do? Well, we try to give ideas that so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, though I'm sure that y'all are already doing creative things, so we'd love to hear about them as well. So please don't hesitate to share in the chat. So this is one we found to be effective. Basically in this exercise, and of course you can adapt that however you need, but folks put up 3 pieces of, when I was young, we called it butcher paper. Now it's probably not called that. Large pieces of paper. So you have one on, 3 different walls, and you'll have the students rotate in small groups. So on one, it'll be, what does stalking look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And then you give them increasing amounts of time when they rotate, because some of the more obvious ones will have been taken already, right? And so this has been really interesting to see play out, because with what does stalking look like, often at first you get the imagery of like the eyeballs or binoculars or something like that, which is, it's not inaccurate. But then when people have to think about it a little more deeply, it's like, oh, well, stalking can also look nice, right? It could look like a gift or an I love you note or an I miss you note or something that's scary in context, but may not be scary to an outsider. It can look overtly violent or not, right? Or really innocuous. And so it can help, it can look like a friend asking if you got that internship this summer, or it can look like a death threat. And so folks can get into that a little bit more and think through about the contextual nature of stalking. And similar here with that, what does it sound like? Well, it could sound really overtly threatening, or it could sound really loving and nice, or it could sound really sad and like someone's trying to guilt you, right? Into that, why won't you answer me? I just want to talk kind of thing. Um, and what does it feel like? And so recognizing that, yeah, stalking is about fear, victims are afraid, but that it's not always that clear cut for our victims. They might also feel guilty, like, did I lead this person on? Or this was a friend or former partner, maybe I don't want to get them in trouble, or I'm confused, I'm angry, right? And also recognizing that even if under all of that is fear and emotional distress, victims are likely to express that differently, because we know victims respond to trauma differently, and also because it's quite a vulnerable thing to say, I'm feeling scared. So that might come out more as, I'm confused, I'm worried, I'm stressed, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, right? And so again, all of this gets to quite a bit of content around stalking that you can do in the debrief, but it's generated from the students and helps them talk to each other and also think more deeply about the contextual nature of stalking and how it might impact victims. Another activity is to take these potential stalking behavior cards, so these kind of behavior cards, and in small groups, ask students to categorize them. So take a look at the behavior and decide, is it romantic pursuit? Maybe that's not going so well. Is it bullying or kind of clique related? Or is it stalking? So, for example, steals things like your textbooks and jackets, so you have to go and ask for them back. And of course, the point here is that it's often quite contextual, right? That could be flirting, right? Like, ooh, let's have an excuse to chat again, right? That was done in a cute way or an attempt at a cute way. It could be bullying or something really clicky, it's a rival Greek life organization or something, or team. And so they're taking your stuff and now you have to go get it back and it's like really stressful. Or it could be stalking, that they are sabotaging this victim and the victim now has to confront the stalker in order to get things they need. And so really there's a variety, and the line there will depend on the situation and the context. So here's a few other of the cards, and these are on our website as well. Um, and so you can do this kind of categorization. And again, of course, the point isn't it's always stalking, it's never stalking, what have you. It's that these intersect. And so in a debrief of this, I'd encourage you to talk about, what might be romantic in one context could be really scary in another, of course, and vice versa, right? With these cards as well, there's another activity you can do. So these are cards that include, again, different stalking behaviors, different levels of kind of severity on their face. And then what you can do, because stalking is a course of conduct, is in small groups, cut these, like, print them, cut them out, and have students pick one at a time, up to 5. And after each card, assume it's part of the same course of conduct, and then talk about these questions. So maybe they pick, you find a camera hidden in your room. Sorry. Okay, how would we feel if this happened to you or if to a friend? Are you feeling scared, confused, flattered, annoyed? I'm feeling pretty scared. Does it seem like a stalking case? Yeah, that one's a little more clear cut, right? Could this be criminal or a conduct violation? I think so. Huh, maybe let's look at the handbook and see like what it might be. How could you plan for safety? And then maybe you go back, okay, now you receive roses with no sender information. You're sure it's them. Assume the same course of conduct. Now, how do you feel? Right. And so, had those situations been reversed because they're picking in a random order, they might say, well, at first with the roses, I was a little bit flattered and just, or kind of confused because we broke up. But I was like, I don't know, maybe they're just sending that to be nice or something. But now that I'm also finding the camera, it does seem more like a stalking case. And now it kind of repaints how I think about that first contact. And sending flowers isn't criminal, but stalking is. And, is there a no contact order, et cetera? And how could I plan for safety? Do I need to, do I want to change dorms if they've sent this to my home, et cetera? And so I should have reversed those examples in the first time. But, every course of conduct will be different. And it kind of, it helps highlight a few things. One is, again, the contextual nature, which is always important to get people to think through, the diversity of stalking behaviors, and also how later acts can reshape your vision of earlier acts, right? Because there's no stalking statute that says when fear has to attach. So if on day one you get anonymous chocolates, you might be like, nice. And if on day two you get an email from your creepy ex saying, hope you like the chocolates, I found you again and I'm showing up and I will harm you, now we don't like the chocolates, right? And so that would still be considered act one in that course of conduct. But going through that with a few more concrete examples, and of course you can write your own as well, can be a helpful way to get folks to think about, and also to put this in the real world. Like, how would I react if that happened? Or if a friend told me about that? Like, where would I go on campus for that? Does that qualify? And to think through that. Now, let's say you do have time for a standalone program. Yay. Again, I think this is important. I highly recommend it. And it's also not something that folks have heard before necessarily. And so that's really nice. So I hope that if you do have the capacity and spaciousness that, if you're offering standalone programming on sexual assault or bystander prevention or dating violence, hopefully you can offer one on stalking as well. And we've written it for you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. So we have a public awareness workshop on our website. We have a campus version and a general population version. They're not that different, just the examples and the case study used is a little bit different. So you can click through our website to find this, but just so you can see, it includes videos and activities. And so videos that explain some of the big picture concepts like the contextual nature of stalking, and then these scenarios. So this one that you might remember from an earlier training, that there's a cup of coffee in my car, and then talk about that in a group, flip it over. Oh, here's what's actually going on, right? There's also a brainstorm on stalking behaviors, and we have these little handouts that y'all can use. And then, like I said, these video case examples. So for the general one, it's the Peggy Klinke story and discussion questions. For campuses, is Caitlin Mathis, who was a college student when she was stalked. And so she really speaks to how that stalking impacted her on campus. And so it's a short video and then discussion. And then so we follow that know it, name it, stop it format. And so this is that stop it piece and action items. And so we have this guidance on our website for supporting loved ones experiencing stalking. So what should you say? What shouldn't you say? Right? This is a nice thing to leave your students with as well if you're doing any kind of program. And we also have videos. And so this is one of several videos that we have. But we're going to go ahead and watch this one so you can get a sense of kind of the look of feel in these, and you can just take it and show it. It's written into the program, but also as a standalone. So I'm going to press play here and let me know in the chat if you have any issues with it. Hopefully it plays okay.
Most victims of stalking talk to a friend, family member, or someone else they know and trust first before deciding to seek additional help. That person's response can make a huge difference. If the victim's fears are validated and taken seriously, they're more likely to tell others, as well as to seek additional help from law enforcement, victim service providers, or other community resources. If someone tells you that they're experiencing stalking, believe them. Many victims blame themselves, so remind them that the stalking is not their fault. Nothing that the victim did or did not do justifies the stalker's behavior. If you see or hear from the stalker, do not share any information about the victim, no matter what the stalker says. Don't just have one conversation, check in with your friend using the communication medium that they prefer. Encourage the victim to make a safety plan and to seek local services to help them do so. If you aren't sure where to start, Victim Connect can help make a referral to local resources. Stalking victims can also complete an assessment at coercivecontrol.org to learn more about the risks in their stalking case. And the Stalking Prevention Awareness and Resource Center has some general information about stalking at stalkingawareness.org. Remember, victims are the experts on their own lives and safety. Friends like you can provide the information, options, and support to help them make the right decisions for themselves. Together, we can know it, name it, and stop it.
So again, we have videos in the same style about some of the concepts that can be a little trickier to explain, right? So we have one on the contextual nature of stalking. We have one on um, you just saw the one on supporting friends. We also have others that are not in this program, but are available on the video page of our website on the intersection of stalking with intimate partner violence, a separate one on stalking and sexual violence, right? And so those are all tools that you can use as part of a program or as a standalone to share that can kind of quickly explain this in a hopefully fairly engaging way. Right. So another way to talk stalking is one of my favorites is media literacy. So I did a webinar fairly recently that's on our website about this in more detail. So definitely feel free to check that out. But if we think about stalking, people aren't coming into our conversation with zero information. They're actually coming in with misinformation because most folks have not had any formal education on stalking, but they have heard the word used casually and they have seen stalking behaviors shown in media, etc., that might have been shown in a way that was not capturing the actual harm. And so one thing I think is important when we're talking about media literacy is sometimes I see the media really vilified. And no single piece of media is the problem, right? So I think that's important to say up front when we're talking about media critique that it's okay for people to like what they like. You know, there's like my favorite movie is The Nightmare Before Christmas. I don't actually think it's okay for skeletons to steal Christmas. Okay. And so that's all right. You can still like what you like. The point of media is not to show great people always behaving well in a realistic way, or none of us would watch it, right? There'd be no conflict. That would not be interesting. And so it's not about saying that's bad or your faves are problematic or what have you, but it is saying, hey, there's a cumulative effect to seeing all of this media misrepresent this issue. And that cumulative effect can miseducate us on what stalking is and isn't. And it's interesting to look at media with this lens and see the messages that it might be sending us that we might be internalizing without even realizing it. So stalking's often shown as romantic. It's usually our male protagonist who will do anything to get the girl, right? And so, she's already left for the airport, so he's going to the airport, but the plane left, so now he's following her to France and finding her hotel. And it usually works, right? Typically that I want to say offender, but I'll say that romantic hero is rewarded for his behavior. It usually pays off, and it's shown as romantic and that kind of do anything for love, nothing can stop true love kind of messaging, right? But it's also shown as funny quite a bit in our sitcoms and cartoons, where it's that, oh, there they are again, and it's kind of played for laughs, and there's no real harm shown there. So if we think about like SpongeBob, will not leave Squidward alone, right? But we know watching it, we're like, well, he's this harmless little idiot, so it's fine. Um, but in real life, someone who just will not stop showing up in their neighbor's home, no, that's actually quite scary, right? Or it's sometimes shown as heroic. So you have, your superheroes swooping in, they've got to watch the person so they can keep them safe. Or sometimes it's shown as edgy and sexy, and it's like, ooh, they really went there, right? And I'm like, no, who else went there? 1 in 3 victims, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 6 men, because they're victims of stalking. Now, I like to see stalking in a horror movie. I'm like, that's right, it's scary, that makes sense. I think it's a lot more dangerous when we show it in these other ways because it's really misinforming folks on what stalking is. And so there's plenty of examples of this. In my opinion, fun program is to take some media clips, watch them in this context with doing a little bit of scene setting around, what is stalking, and we have some basic slides for that on our website. And then just talk about it. What messages is the sending us? And so I'm going to show you a quick clip. It's a dated one, and I admit that, but it's such a good example. I mean, it's a good bad example from the original Sex and the City series that shows that romantic pursuit as stalking. And so when we look at it through that lens, how does it change our vision of what this looks like? So we'll give that a quick watch.
This is not the lobby.
Sit down, have a drink.
What are you doing? You're calling my house? You're following me to hotels?
Could you please sit down for 1 minute and listen to me? Please, 1 minute.
You know, I don't have time for this. I have a boyfriend and a deadline, and you have a wife and apparently a drinking problem.
I'm not drunk.
Then what is your
Will you
excuse?
slow down? I can't think. I was on the phone the other day.
Yes.
When I said I was leaving, you didn't say anything, so I got nervous,
So, what?
I don't know.
You know, this has to stop. The flirting and the jerking me around and the calling my boyfriend. He doesn't know about you, and I don't want him to ever know about you.
Why is that?
Oh, go lay in your beige bed.
Carrie, wait. I haven't explained this very well. Now, wait a minute. Listen, the thing is, I miss you.
Too bad. Do not come in here. Don't follow me in here.
I have to talk to you.
What? What is it? What is it you have to say?
I made a mistake.
You.
I love you.
You. My mind was yelling how angry I was, but my heart.
Yay. Okay. So when I watch this in person with other folks, they get pretty upset when we're looking at it through the lens of stalking and, in this case, potentially sexual violence as well. Because I'm like ready to do a risk assessment, right? I'm like, well, how many stalking behaviors did she name in that? You're calling my house, you're driving by my street, you're showing up in places. And then, of course, you see the physical following. And so the challenge here is that this is shown as ultimately wanted behavior, right? Which is, oh, I said no, but I meant yes, right? And it really reinforces that attitude that this is all part of the chase and this kind of hard to get, and that, yeah, she hates him, but she loves him. And actually, it totally works, right? Because, spoiler alert, they get back together, and this is successful, right? And she's into it. And so, it sends a lot of pretty problematic messages about what romance looks like. She could not be any more clear. She says, stop calling me, stop doing this. This is your problem. You miss me. That's too bad. She physically walks away from him. She says, stay away from me. She pushes him away physically. And yet, all of that is really just barriers to getting where he needs to go narratively, which is to win her love, or at least her sex at this moment. And so, and ask students to think of other examples, right? There's plenty of more recent examples as well. It's not that recent, but I know it's having a resurgence, like Twilight. You have, Edward peeking into her room and watching her sleep, and she sees that as really romantic. So this kind of idea of obsession and being really glorified and how it works, right? And that these are suitors with good intentions is what we see. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not only shown as romantic, it's also shown as funny quite a bit. And there's some nuance. Well, there's nuance to all of these categories, which I'd get into if we had more time. But I think it's also interesting to think about the difference in gender representation. Typically, and I'm generalizing, there's absolutely exceptions, but often when we see female stalkers, they're shown as really crazy and desperate. When we show male stalkers, it's either shown as romantic or it's like a horror movie. It's like one of those, but they're not often shown as crazy in this way. And so this is from the kind of resurgence of Looney Tunes. We won't watch the whole thing, but a kind of common trope I think you'll recognize that shows this kind of romantic pursuit as funny, though, that's played for laughs.
Been thinking for a while, and there's something I gotta tell you.
I'm kind of busy.
Been thinking that our love for each other has grown so very strong.
Love?
It's
Wait.
plain to see we're building our worlds together.
Back up for a minute.
I'm looking in your eyes right now, and I can tell you feel the same.
You're joking me.
We are in love. I am so in love today. We are in love.
I think I'm gonna run away.
We are in love.
Did you tap my phone lines?
We are in love. Yes, I tapped your phone lines.
I won't lie, you're a very pretty lady.
Thank you.
But you're crazy, crazy, crazy. You make me want to move to Bolivia.
I'll go with you.
You know, I'm thinking I should get a restraining order.
Those are so hard to enforce.
Cause your car was parked outside my house every night this
Your
week.
neighbors are sweet.
You're the reason that I have to keep my shades drawn.
I'll watch you through the chimney.
I've installed an alarm system with motion beam detectors.
I have the code.
Give me just 5 minutes.
All right, so you get the idea here. And so you see this stalking is funny, right? So here we're not supposed to actually be really concerned about Bugs Bunny's safety. We're like, he's fine. These are cartoons. This is for kids. It's just this funny mismatch in affections. And she's crazy. She's delusional. And it also speaks to that idea of crazy and delusional stalkers, which often when we see our persistent females, they are shown as more crazy. Like I said, where our male stalkers are shown as more romantic or heroic. This also reinforces the idea of bigger picture, regardless of gender, of kind of that delusional stalker. So you might have heard the term like stan, like, oh, I totally stan that band or whatever. And I think that was like not a way people use it. So sorry if I failed at slang. But to say that you stan something, it's a reference to the Eminem song Stan about an obsessed fan who is, collaging Eminem's face and is clearly really mentally disturbed. And so yes, there are stalkers that have mental illness, but that's by far a small minority of stalkers. Most stalkers are choosing to stalk, not because of any sort of craziness or delusion, particularly when they're stalking someone they know. Someone who's delusional is more likely to stalk a stranger or celebrity. I'm not saying that never can overlap, but it typically doesn't. And so this also sends a message about who are stalkers, right? And the sense that they're crazy, they're delusional. And here also, again, there's no real harm that we see besides his annoyance. And so then you can show a clip like this or any others and then just have students discuss, right? Like, what are the jokes here? What's being presented as funny in these situations? Well, the joke is this mismatch in affection, right? What's funny is how crazy she is, and the lengths that she'll go to. What is this messages to potential stalkers? Well, it tells them, these behaviors are a little much, right? Some of them, but also that it's kind of funny and that it's coming from a place of delusion and or love. To potential victims, it tells them like nothing you can do here. I mean, they talk about how hard restraining orders are to enforce in this video. And also the idea that like, well, is what it is and kind of you should be flattered. And, there's always been jokes about serious topics. Is this wrong messages or is it harmless fun and why? So again, it's not about judging the media. It's about talking about like, what does this send and what can we think about it? Subcategory is that stalking to prove my love. And so we always do a Valentine's Day post that rounds up some of the most problematic stalking romanticization or joke cards that we see every year. And so showing some of these can be helpful as well. So that sense of, stalking as romance, talking to show love, joking about stalking doesn't matter, and how or how not. Lyrics can also be really fun. And so this was a song which, as you read the lyrics, you might be like, oh yeah, I know this song because it was on the radio all the time. And so this idea also is stalking because of obsession. So this is Jonas Brothers song. It's, if you actually listen to the lyrics, they talk about, any road that you take, that you'll find me. I'm a sucker for all the subliminal things no one knows about you. You're making the typical me break my typical rules, right? And so that sense of, I can't get enough. I follow you through the dark. I am always there and I will follow you. And it's because I'm so obsessed and into you, right? Um, we also have a playlist of all songs that normalize stalking. This is free on you can get to it from our website. I'm always adding to it. This is an old screenshot. It's actually longer now. I think it's like 3.5 hours long. And I'm always looking for more songs. So if you have any suggestions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And all of these so stalking one of these ways, right, is either romantic or funny or heroic. And it's interesting. And so I usually play this at trainings. I'll play it when people are coming in the room and it breaks and just kind of gets you to listen a little bit differently. Let me go back to heroic here. Sorry, I thought I put an example of that. With that here, stalking is heroic. We see quite a bit in our superhero movies. So if you think about like Spider-Man, right? He's got to watch over Mary Jane so he can swoop in and save her if anything bad happens. Well, what do our stalkers say? Especially our intimate partner stalkers. There's that sense of, well, I trust you. I don't trust the world around you. That's why I have to swoop in and save you if anything gets dangerous. And it really fits right into that idea of surveillance as love, right? That I have to keep you safe and that's why I have to watch you all the time. And that kind of heroism, right? If you're not sure why Mrs. Doubtfire's up here, just think about it. It's a real downer when you think of that movie through a stalking lens. You have offender, joint custody, violates custody agreement, impersonates third party, sabotages new relationship, et cetera, et cetera. But he's the good guy, right? It's because he loves his kids so much. And that's how we're supposed to think about it. Um, and so, big picture, here's the cumulative effect that I'm talking about, right? And of course, you can explore more examples or fewer examples and encourage students to bring in their own examples and all of that. But this is where it needs, well, I won't say it needs, this is where I would like it to end up. There's a cumulative effect of this fantasy of stalking that's created by this kind of media, right? And the fantasy is that the stalker is an attractive stranger or charming chance encounter or meet cute or secret admirer. The stalker has good intentions, usually romantic. At worst, they're a little awkward and misguided. It's kind of a SpongeBob where it's like, ugh, there they are again. They are so awkward. They do not get it, right? And it's kind of annoying. At best, it's really sexy or flattering, and the target's supposed to feel really seen by this. So, again, at worst, it's like, ugh, this is annoying. But also, there's something like I feel really seen. I feel really chosen. Someone sees the innate specialness in me, and that's very romantic and desirable. Um, and you should at least be grateful, if not really flattered and returning the affections, right? That's just not what stalking is in real life. In real life, as you've already learned, the reality is stalkers are usually people we know that we do not want to talk to. And we've made that clear. They have different motives, but mostly they want to scare their victims and delight in doing so. It's not a misunderstanding because they were trying to be romantic. They were trying to scare the person. The behaviors are interfering, invasive, often disturbing, and often violent, right? We have sending dead animals in the mail. We have carving names in trees 300 miles away to be near the ex partner's new home. We have a variety, we have sexual violence and homicide and all of these disturbing, violent behaviors. It's not cute, in other words. And most stalkers are terrified. I mean, sorry, most victims are terrified, right? At they're distressed, they're terrified, and many of them make major changes in their lives to try to get away from these offenders. We know 1 in 7 stalking victims relocate. Many lose time from work. Many have academics decline, right? And so that's the reality of stalking. And so when I see this minimization around stalking, there's no one cause of that, but I do think this contributes because what I kind of think to myself is, oh, you're reacting to the fantasy of stalking, not the reality of stalking. And I'm not even mad there is a fantasy version. I just want it to be called out for what it is. And to counterbalance that with the reality, right? Because at this point, if you see an episode of TV with, say, sexual violence, usually something pops up at the end that's like, hey, if you've experienced this, call this number. We don't have that for stalking. So we just have the fantasy with no counterbalance of the reality. We just have the misinformation and no, but here's what actually going on. There is no PSA, right? And that's why it's up to all of us to be really calling out that fantasy and providing people with that information about that reality. And recognizing that when we come to a training about stalking, a lot of us kind of have this fantasy in our head to some degree. And how can we analyze that and break that down? So again, I'm certainly not saying this causes stalking, but it has some impacts. It often builds empathy with stalkers rather than victims because our stalkers tend to be the active protagonist in these pieces of media, right? They're the romantic hero. They have good intentions. They're trying to get the girl. So that's the perspective we see and are kind of primed to root for. It can lead victims to minimize experiences because, well, I've seen that on TV and it was shown as, cute or harmless or what have you. And of course, that affects those informal supports as well. It's misinforming the general public about the dangers and realities of stalking. And big picture, it's creating an environment where stalkers can better get away with this because it's normalizing these behaviors. And so, what can we do about it? Well, certainly talking about it in a formal program is great, but I'd really encourage you, really throughout all your programming and awareness efforts around stalking, formal and informal, to be taking these steps to identify and reflect on your beliefs and the potential students' beliefs about stalking, to acknowledge the impact that can have, to use media as a starting point where appropriate, and then to be that source of accurate information that's so very needed on this issue. So, thinking about your own beliefs and encouraging students to do the same. How did I learn about stalking? Like people don't come into my training not knowing, having ever heard that word. So, where is that coming from? When I think about stalking, what scenarios do I imagine? What are the tropes that I've been shown that I might think of first? Am I thinking about that hooded figure, for example, or stranger? And is that accurate? Is that comprehensive? Am I thinking about stalking an intimate partner and non-intimate partner? Because what I find is that often in our field, our stalking response comes out of our domestic violence response, but our general public is thinking about stalkers as strangers. And so we're both kind of only seeing part of the picture and we're walking past each other, right? And so thinking about, am I thinking about all the scenarios possible? And when I envision a stalking victim, what comes to mind? What kind of person is being stalked? Is that accurate? Is it always a white, thin, cisgender female, right, in a corner going, no, right? That person does exist and can be a victim of stalking, but so can a variety of other folks. And so we want to be thinking about that too. Acknowledge the impacts. Might other people share these assumptions? And what are the impacts on recognizing stalking when it occurs and on the sense of urgency you assign to stalking? And that's always my big point, is that stalking really is missing that sense of urgency, right? And so if you don't think it's that big a deal, why? Why do you think that, right? Where did you learn that? And what examples have you seen of that? And I'd say to verbalize the assumptions when appropriate, right? It's not that you're the giver of knowledge and have always known all this wisdom. Letting people know, when a lot of people hear stalking, they think about that mass stranger. And I used to think that, honestly, when I thought about a stalker, but I actually learned more about it right? So kind of building that entry point. Really, like, look, there's a lot of misinformation on stalking. I barely have training on it, like no one is training on it. So let's get into it now, right? So normalize, not I wouldn't want to say normalize that we don't know because obviously we want to build information, but make this space safe to say like, yeah, a lot of people have that misperception. You're not alone. You're not stupid for thinking that. And here's the real information, right? Because again, when people are coming into the training, they already have some ideas. You also want to be mindful in how you represent stalking in your training and event promotion, as well as in your public awareness campaigns. And we address this in that guide as well. But if you're trying to get people to come to a stalking program, if you just look up stalker image, you're going to get that hooded figure. But that's reinforcing a myth that is not true. And so instead, think about showing stalking behaviors. Maybe you're showing a camera or excessive contact or something like that. Showing fear realistically. I could do a whole presentation just on like the madness of looking for images of stalking. I do all our social media and design as well. And so I spend a lot of time looking for scared looking people. And you get a lot of really campy scared people with this kind of like, oh no, right? So we don't want to show that. We don't want to trivialize the stalking. We also want to show diversity of stalking victims to help kind of reinforce the idea that they don't all look the same, right? And of course, reflect the reality of the population on your campus. If you do have a certain ethnic population, et cetera, make sure they're represented in your materials. Um, but so being thoughtful about what messages am I sending about what stalking is, because the picture is education as well. So what am I showing? Am I showing a dark alleyway? Because that's actually reinforcing some myths about stalking that you don't want to do. We have these posters you can order for free from our website. And this is all about that, combating that misinformation, right? It's saying, hey, it's not cute, romantic, flattering, etc. It's stalking. Know it, name it, stalk it, learn. No, don't stalk it. Know it, name it, stop it, learn more. And again, the assumption here is you've seen stalking presented this variety of ways, and we're here to tell you that's not true, actually. And here's the counter message, and here's some real information. This would make no sense if there was no media about stalking or if people had no preconceived notions. And so, kind of coming in with that, we know you've heard X, but here's why, can be helpful too. Comment on media if you're watching it together, formally, informally, etc. So, if someone did that in real life, it'd really freak me out. That's being shown as cute, but that character is doing way too much. Or, if we read our celebrity stalking news saying, that must be so scary, I'm glad they have all that security, most stalking victims don't, right? Not to minimize that celebrities can be stalked and it can be really scary. And to bring that down to this is not just a celebrity issue, because a lot of our stalking news is focused on celebrities, and our stalking laws come from a celebrity stalking case. That was the first stalking law in the nation, California, 1990, Rebecca Schaefer's murder. So it's not to minimize that, but it is to say, yes, and that's not most stalking, and that, us non-public figures can be stalked as well. And use what's compelling about the media to start a dialogue and know when media gets it right. And so we have some posts that kind of do that, or at least try to do that. So if there's a popular show that features stalking, okay, what, instead of saying, well, this handled it well or this handled it poorly, I'm more inclined to say, what can this teach us about real stalking victimization? How can this be an entry point into a real dialogue about stalking? And so last year, The Watcher was very popular. And so we pulled out some messages from that, right? So here's a quote from a character saying, basically saying they don't know how to react to the stalking, and then putting that in a little bit of context. Like, yeah, a lot of victims really struggle with that in real life, right? Same, the show Wednesday actually had a really nice handling of stalking. It took the stalking plot really seriously. And so, for example, we have this quote from Gomez saying, we tried to call the police, but his family were the oldest and richest. No one believed us. And then to give a little context, yeah, stalkers often target victims who are marginalized or outcast, which is a term they used in the show. And so to say, yeah, like they're right, that totally happens. And here's how it applies to real life. Same here at the end. It ends, the first season ends on a cliffhanger where Wednesday's now being stalked. So who's stalking Wednesday is kind of the question leading into season 2. And so who's it likely to be? Well, we just took that breakdown of who offenders generally are and then put in people from the show. So it's just a more funny way, not funny, but it's like a more fun way to get that information across. Well, here's who it's likely to be, right? And a lot of media doesn't get it all wrong or all right. So, like the show Beef, that was really popular. Okay, as in the show, stalking escalates over time. Here's an example of that. Unlike the show, stalking is not typically mutual, right? So, this isn't us saying the show is good or bad. It is just us saying, here's what the show's. Yeah, that's generally true, or that's actually pretty rare, or what have you, right? And just giving it a little more context. Because I love to see stalking in a horror movie, we also have this new Halloween campaign about keeping stalking in horror movies and out of real life. And we are lucky to have a few horror stars, including Christine McCarthy, who was in the original, or I guess the second Chucky movie, Child's Play movie, as well as the original kid, Chucky, Alex Vincent, involved in this campaign. And the idea is, okay, keep it scary, you know, it's scary, show it there, right? We don't want it in real life. So I don't think this is trivializing stalking, but it is a more engaging and fun way to say, hey, this is what this is what it isn't. Folks always ask me about the TV show You. And so we have discussion guides on all 4 seasons of the TV show. I sometimes joke if you want to, watch it and not have fun, you can do these. But these honestly have been really popular on campuses. And again, these are not demonizing the show. They're just saying, okay, here's the thing that happened in the show. Like, what message might this send? How realistic is that? How not realistic is that? The show often plays with the tropes of romantic comedy and horror. And so it's interesting to get into that and also have some real information about stalking. And so we have discussion guides to the most recent season, and it can be a nice one before the next and last season comes out. Uh, and then to, again, be that source, that last thing of accurate information. And so that might mean leading a program. It might also mean sharing an infographic, sharing something on social media, etc. And integrating this with other populations. So it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Maybe now, if you're tabling about that, print out our infographic on stalking and sexual violence, right? If it's Pride Month and you're talking about issues that affect the LGBTQ plus community, um, have this about stalking and LGBTQ plus folks, right? And so, share that information and let folks know where the resources are for accurate information on stalking. So hopefully you can again integrate stalking into your existing programming and or do a separate program just about stalking or a public awareness campaign. But we don't just want this to be a one and done. We want this to be an ongoing effort and to sort of up the dosage, as we say, right? Um, so regularly share stalking news cases and resources on social media as appropriate for, where you're located. If you're often sharing, or if you share, case studies about intimate partner violence, for example, make sure you share ones about stalking as well and include intimate and non-intimate partner stalking cases. Um, you want to integrate stalking into other awareness months. That could be through those infographics as well as through social media. So here's examples of some past posts that we've done. So if you follow us on social, which hopefully you do or will after this, um, we're always talking about stalking and how it intersects with whatever issue is being focused on, right? So it was just February, well, I guess it's April now. It was recently February. And so we had facts about adolescent stalking and teen dating violence, right? Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we're focusing on stalking and sexual violence. Um, Elder abuse, domestic violence, specific populations, etc. And so, we don't want to be like, well, it was stalking time and now we move on to this other issue because stalking so often intersects with other issues. Let's make sure that we're talking about it year round. Um, and if you're thinking, well, we don't really know enough about stalking, right? Or my partners don't, you can reach out to us for training or for other resources on recognizing and responding to stalking. Again, awareness is great. We want to get more folks in the door, recognizing what's going on, taking it seriously, coming to our services. And then we want our services to be up to par, right? To really help those victims and survivors and to achieve that offender accountability. And so both those go hand in hand. Also, these are kind of your low-hanging fruit things to do. Um, just having stocking posters in your office, right? Have those brochures available. If you have brochures in your, say, mental health service provider on a variety, eating disorders and intimate partner violence, have it on stalking too. So that if your victim is sitting in the office waiting to be seen by somebody, this word shows up and they can think about, oh, maybe that is what it is. I'm going to learn a little bit more about that, right? Make sure the word stalking's on your website with links to relevant resources. We often find that, most students associate the Title IX office, for example, with sexual assault because that's often what they primarily talk about. And so make sure they know where to go for stalking. So think through questions like, is stalking mentioned on your website? Is it in your mission statement if it's part of your mission? Do you provide programs on it? If not, could you? Where can they go to learn more, right? If you have some resources on, here's the hotline for, say, like RAINN for sexual violence, Maybe share Victim Connect as well. They help all victims of crime, including stalking victims. So really building that into the way that you talk about your programming, and then of course backing that up by actually including it in your programming. Um, and again, that social media piece, right? Making sure that you're talking about stalking as much as you are any other related issue. As some of you may know, January is Stalking Awareness Month, and so uh, that is a great time to particularly focus on stalking. Of course, it's always Stalking Awareness Month to me, so I always encourage you to do a stalking program. I know that January can be difficult for campuses. I recognize that with depending when your school breaks are, etc. But at the same time, if we're making some noise in April, in October, let's make some noise for Stalking Awareness Month as well. We've seen a variety of creative programs to do that. We really have everything you need on our website as well. So the programs and exercises and activities that I talked about, as well as daily social media posts. We have newsletter blurbs you can copy and paste into, a listserv blast. We have letters to the editor. We have pledges that students can take to take stalking seriously, and we've seen folks do those at events. Or of course, you could invite in a survivor speaker or somebody like that. Um, we also have our first day of action for stalking awareness. We had this past January 18th. And so this is the first just day about stalking. And we were really excited to see the results of this. And so the idea is to spark a dialogue on stalking and to wear something sparkly. And the reason for that is that the founder of Stalking Awareness Month, Debbie Riddle, she talks about her sister was killed by a stalker. And she talks about how Peggy had this sparkling personality, but as the stalking went on, we saw that shine fade. So the idea is let's bring the sparkle back for Peggy and for all victims and survivors of stalking. And so it's an easy kind of, setup thing to do. It's right after New Year's, and so all your tinsel's on sale. And I can tell you personally, because she's a friend of mine, that Debbie loves this campaign, and that it was really exciting to see folks focusing on this day on stalking. Of course, also backing that up ideally with resources, information, programming, discussion, etc. So I hope that you'll participate in that next year, whether you did or did not this past one. So, of course, I mentioned resources throughout, but a few resources, and then I'll stick around for questions. Um, of course, what we need most of all is that coordination, right? Which I know is easier said than done. Like I've acknowledged, awareness doesn't solve everything, right? But we need everyone really together on this. We need our awareness educators to make sure our general public knows what stalking is, that our students take it seriously, that they call each other out if their friends are engaging in stalking behavior, that when they tell that friend, hey, I'm kind of freaked out, that they take that really seriously and get them to help. We get our victim services to recognize stalking as unique victimization, as well as one that often intersects with intimate partner and sexual violence, and a safety plan around it with the urgency that it deserves. We need our law enforcement to recognize it and to charge it. We need our prosecutors to pick up those charges and argue them effectively. We need our courts to sentence it appropriately for the harmful victimization it is. And we need our probation, parole, and corrections folks to continue to hold those offenders accountable and keep our victims safe. When any of that doesn't happen, we lose victims. And after this series about stalking, you now know more about stalking than most people in our field. That is the reality of the situation. Most of our professionals tasked with responding to victims and survivors have little or no training on stalking, and our victims and survivors are very unlikely to have encountered a formal presentation or resource about stalking. And so it's really up to all of us to say, I get this, and not everyone does, not all my partners do. But I see the urgency here, and I see the need for accurate information. People are coming in with some ideas and myths that are really harmful. And how can I be that advocate for that victim and be that source of real information? Because if you don't, no one will. And it's so critical and so important. We're here to help you do that as much as possible, though it's definitely no easy task. So I already mentioned that these are available on our website. You can order them for free. Victim Connect, I mentioned. This is the closest thing we have to a stalking hotline. And so if you're sharing, RAIN hotline, DV hotline, you might want to share Victim Connect as well. They're out of the National Center for Victims of Crime. And of course, everyone's favorite website, you know what you love, it's stalkingawareness.org, where we have those practitioner guides. all the exercises that I talked about, the discussion guides, the playlist, the campus awareness, the one slide on stalking, all of that is available for free on our website. You don't have to request it. You can just take it and run with it. We love to hear how it was used. And or if you've done a program with it differently. So like we had a group do a karaoke event with some songs from our playlist, our stalking playlist, and then talk about like the lyrics and the normalization. So I thought that was really fun. So we love to hear about how things worked or didn't work or what else would be helpful to you. Again, our victim resources, we are not a direct service provider, so please don't send victims to SPARC for anything other than information, but do use our resources so you can help educate victims on what is stalking, what is true about stalking, what is not true about stalking, and webinar. So if you're like, I wish I could hear Dana talk even more, you are in luck because we have an archive of recorded webinars and we're called SPARC, so I got us to call it the SPARchives. So that was like the height of my career. So check us out in the SPARchives anytime. Great way to get folks kind of up to speed on at least some foundational stalking information. We're also on social media, great way to see what we're up to, as well as just to share whatever we shared. That's what it's there for. We won't be mad. You want to slap your logo on it, go for it, and then share it. And that will help to keep that information out about the intersection of stalking and other victimizations. And sign up for our newsletter. Here's my contact information. I just want to thank you so much for your attention and for all of your good work. I know it's easy for me to say, hey, think about this, use this tool, add this exercise, or whatever. But you're the ones who are actually on the ground, keeping victims safe and educating your students. It is all easier said than done, and I totally understand and respect that. So truly thank you for the work that you do. And don't hesitate to reach out if another kind of program would be helpful. If you want me to take a look at your current programming and say, where could we add a little bit more on stalking in here? If you write something original and want us to look at it, anything like that, we're here. We're usually free of charge and we're happy to do it. That's what we're here for. So truly thank you. And with all that being said, I will now open it up to questions and keep an eye on the meeting chat. So let me know what questions you have.
I don't see any questions in the chat. Thank you, Dana. Yeah. And thank you so much for your information. I think all of this information is so great. And it's so nice to have things that people, especially with the dwindling resources and at institutions, to just have it at your fingertips, I think is fantastic. So thank you so much for that. And please feel free to ask questions or email Dana for specific questions. And I would agree, yes, Dana, you are an amazing presenter. You make it exciting to talk about this, which seems a little odd, but really appropriate. And I think reinforcement, like we need to get the word out and kind of normalize the accurate information instead of what has been told as you talked today. So thank you so much. If there aren't any questions, we can give you back a few minutes of your time. Thank you all very much for attending. Dana, thank you so much. Thank you to SPARC for partnering with us to offer this series. We are so lucky to have SPARC around. So.
Oh, well, thank you. We're delighted to help. And yeah, I hope this was helpful for folks. And don't hesitate to reach out for any other help or training or anything in your work because you're the ones actually on the ground doing the thing. So thanks so much for having